day, everybody. It is Calxiyn and Hunter here, and welcome to the Queen's Court podcast. Happy Pride Month, everyone. This podcast is sponsored by my Patreon. Not really sponsored, but we're gonna keep saying that it is. You guys should support me over on Patreon if you want some cool rewards. See the podcast a week-ish early. So today, we're gonna be answering some of your Pride Month questions and kind of like inserting our own questions for like a narrative. Like that was something that I kind of thought about while organizing these. I was like, okay, well, people are asking like this, and this, so we'll start from the beginning and then we'll go to the end. We'll tell y'all a little gay story.
And then when you
how
get to
I'm
the
imagining
end,
it.
we stop.
Exactly. And so I guess the best place to start is how we identify and when we kind of realize, which is a very loaded question, because a lot of people don't know that you're trans, Hunter. Did you know that? Because we were talking about it in the first podcast, and a lot of people didn't know. But, like, our identity and our pronouns are in our bio, like the Calxiyn bio. I put them there. So do you want to go first?
Well, we don't really talk about it that much, and
No.
I think that's why people are surprised when they do learn that I'm trans. I think they think I'm just vaguely fruity, and I think that's what...
Somebody was like, I just thought that Hunter was somebody who owned a drum set. That's what they said about. I never would have guessed.
I own a ukulele. Very close. I own a ukulele.
And so yeah, I think that's a lot of people's probably perception of you specifically is like, oh well, you know, you're just a hippie or like a rocker type. You know what I mean?
That's fair. I think that's where my family is right now. I don't think they think I'm trans, even the ones that I haven't told, which is most of them, other than just my parents, really. I think they think that I'm just some varietal of fruity and that they'll learn about it when it becomes relevant to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, you know, coming out. We're going to talk about that later, probably.
Yeah, a couple
but if we're talking about, like, the origin of how we figured it out...
this is like a different origin story
then I guess I am. Yeah, two different origin stories. So it's kind of related to what we do here because I've always been... You can tell, like, when a trans person looks into their past, or, like, any varietal queer person looks in their past, you think about, like, wow, I did a lot of gay shit and didn't know I was gay at the time. And that was what it was for me, right? I remember as a child, being very uncomfortable with masculinity, which is something, it's very difficult.
It's not a requirement.
Yeah, it's not a requirement, and it's very difficult to, when talking about, like, being an egg and not knowing that you're trans, is that a lot of the signs of being trans are not only symptoms of being trans. You can be cis and have, like, your own experience and own relationship to being, you know, cisgender or your own gender.
It's almost like a lot of the things that make us realize that we are LGBT in some variety are also the things that society just enforces on everyone and is toxic for everyone. Yeah. You can be, like, positively masculine, but a lot of people are kind of forced on, like, toxic masculinity, and I think it can be the same, like, for women as well. Like, you know, all of the social pressures that follow with being a woman. And so a lot of the things that I think a lot of people feel just uncomfortable with in general, of course they're gonna make somebody who's in the gay community uncomfortable too, if that makes sense, you know, or even more so. It's like all the heteronormative stuff that we should all try to break, or the toxic part, I guess I should say. You know, like that's something that we should all be trying to stop, but it's going to probably affect somebody who's trans a little bit heavier, or somebody who's gay,
It's different. It affects everyone and it's different. But it's like, as a kid, like I remember being like, about the idea of gender and not entirely comfortable with, like, I think about my cousins and they're real boys, and I remember growing up I was not a boy's boy. It's unique because in some regards, like, I liked camping, like I was fine getting dirty, but I also didn't enjoy... I found, like, a lot of men were very aggressive and there was a lot of posturing, and I've always, like, this is uncomfortable, but it's not just that I'm uncomfortable with it and it's posturing. There's just some intangible... You can explain to someone who isn't transgender that, like, well, you know, I was uncomfortable with my assigned gender and I like to... My version of transgender is doing this or getting surgeries or dressing differently or...
Yeah.
But you will never be able to get them to understand that individual experience of it. It requires a kind of tangible human experience that's not reducible to words. and that
Yeah.
you can't explain to someone. So it's very hard to talk about why I knew I was trans growing up, but it was there.
Yeah.
Nobody questions their gender or has a weird relationship to their gender to an extent that a trans person does and is cis. That just doesn't happen.
I kind of see it as, and like this happens to me too, having ADHD, so it kind of overlaps, but I feel like that when I hit a wall, my brain just does this, and I wouldn't be able to explain to you what this is exactly.
Unless you had it.
Unless you, right? And so, like, for me, too, like, when I, sort of wake up in the morning and I decide what to wear, like, if I'm looking at, a dress or something like that, I sometimes feel that, like, meh, and that's how I know, okay, well, dresses are out of the question today. It's time to wear, like, a t-shirt or something instead, right? Because, like, I guess we didn't get to me yet, but I sort of, like, identify in that, like I kind of want to, like, dress or look masculine sometimes, look feminine other times, you know what I mean? And some people, like, say that's androgynous. Like, I think gender fluid fits best with me. That's just how I sort of see it. But it's that sort of, like, imagine, when people did those, like, sunburns on your arm, like, in elementary school? It feels like that, but it feels like that in your head, at least for me. So I feel like that it's not even that, like, physical sensation, but it's just something in your brain is just like, no.
It's like if no one else had a nose, but you had a nose, and you could smell everyone else's BO. You could be like, oh God, I don't want to do that. Like, that's what the reaction is. It's physical. And I also think that to an extent there's a euphoria when I really enjoyed it. More than I disliked masculinity, I really enjoyed finding a kind of niche of femininity that wasn't something that wasn't masculinity. And I just always assumed growing up, even when I was very young, that it's like, oh, I'm just different than other people.
Yeah.
It's not this. And that was also spurred on that I didn't know what a transgender person was growing up at all.
And it's funny that you say that because I had the opposite experience with being bi.
Yeah.
Is that I just thought that everyone was bi, right? You're like, oh, you thought you were just different. I thought that I was just the same because there wasn't anything until like maybe grade 8 or grade 7 when people started using like gay in a derogatory way that there was any indication that other people were not. Because I was like, well, what does gay mean? You know what I mean? Like that kind of opened up that conversation, right? Yeah. But like I totally thought the opposite of you. I was like, well, I'm not different.
Everyone's like this. No, and I was acutely aware that I was a little different than other people. That was
also kind of awkward because I remember a specific instance, like in high school, where somebody that I knew like was gay, and I was like, but are you sure though? Like, you know what I mean? Because I just thought everybody was bi. So I was like, are you positive? And they must have thought I was homophobic. But it's kind of almost the opposite, where I was just like, I didn't know that there was like one or the other. I didn't know that people were just like heterosexual or what. You know what I mean? I didn't know that
I didn't know straight people existed. No one told me.
I didn't realize that some people were only gay or only straight. You know what I mean? And so I was like, are you sure? And like I hope that like, you know, like now if they ever think about that moment, because it's embarrassing for me because I'm like, why was I like this? You know what I mean? But like I just it didn't occur to me until like I think later when I got more into, because I was always online, right? But I think when I got like more into online, especially during high school, like that's when I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So that's I guess the difference between us is I was just like, everyone is like this.
Yeah, and I think I had growing up, I had a kind of fascination when I learned what, it's really embarrassing. As far as I remember, I think the first time I learned what a transgender person was, and this is so embarrassing, was Family Guy. Was the character Quagmire's like the giggity
I can't imagine that was great.
Dad, there was an episode where he became his mom. In retro, I don't want to watch the episode because in retrospect, it probably aged really poorly. But I must have been about 12 or 13 when I first watched that, and I was just like, oh, these people exist. That's really interesting. That's interesting that you can do that. It didn't impress upon me that these people were like gross or bad and that I wasn't supposed to like them. I think I had a really naive look at it where I'm just like, oh, these people are neat. And I had a kind of fascination with them. Whereas like when I was a kid, when I would like write stories, I would have transgender characters, not really knowing, they weren't transgender characters because I didn't know what that was. It was just like, oh, a person became it went from a girl or a boy to a girl.
Like magic almost,
Yes.
you know what I mean?
I had this like really abstract, long, ongoing fan fiction of myself as a child. Like I imagined myself like, wonder what it would be like as a girl. Like I just imagined that a lot as a kid. And it's only growing up that I realized like, oh, other people don't do that. that was just a me thing. And I was always really like, the idea of queerness was very normal to me. And so I only finally put 2 and 2 together when I was reading Ruby fanfiction. And you know this about me.
Yeah.
But in high school, I was a depressive little goblin.
Yeah.
I think you wanted to do a podcast, one of these, about our time in high school.
Yeah,
right?
we probably
So we'll
yeah.
get into that more. But there was a period in my high school where I just didn't go to classes. Like, I would go to school. I can't believe I graduated and that I have, like, I'm graduating university with, like, honors now. But, like, I didn't go to class. I spent most of my time, like, most of my waking hours reading Ruby fanfiction. I would go into the cafeteria for 2 periods straight and just read Ruby fanfiction. And then we shared our school was 2 schools connected, so the other school would come in and I couldn't stay there, so I would then walk outside in the park adjacent and just read fanfiction. And my parents were like, are you going to class? And I'm like, in a sense. I'm learning a lot about like the citrus scale, which if you know what that is, I feel really poor for you. But eventually one night I was just lying in bed reading fanfiction as I do, and I was like, why am I so emotionally invested, or why do I feel this intense sense of yearning when I'm reading about Ruby, which was like a group of all girls living their life as girls. Before that, I wasn't really an avid reader. And nor did I end up, I think, watch too much. I mean, I guess occasional media with female, that was very female-centric, but this was the most I had read in a very long time. Like, I was mainlining very female-centric stories, and I'm like, why do I feel this intense sense of yearning? Why do I feel like I want to be this? Like, because it's not the adventure. Like, I don't want to become a warrior. It's not even that,
I don't want to fight people.
Yeah, it's not that I don't have friends. I have friends. That's not what I'm yearning. And I eventually whittled it down to like, oh, I want to be a girl. That's what that feeling is. And suddenly it's like the last, like, it's like when you get those long pieces in Tetris and you can slide it down the side and you get a Tetris and you're like, oh. And I think like the next night I told you in a...
Maybe. I don't remember this event.
You
so
don't remember
I'm
this,
very
but
sorry.
you also don't remember anything in high school. I think I was like, hey, Cal, I think I might be transgender. And you were like, okay. So that was nice that it was the first person I told was fairly, like, confident about it. I had a therapist at the time, and I told her. And it took me about a month till I realized, like, oh, yeah, this is like definitely a thing. And then I just started reading up about it, and I watched every like YouTuber I could find that talked about it. I followed a bunch of people online. I read articles, and the more I read, the more I was just like, oh yeah, no, I'm not. This is like a thing. And I was so anxious at the time because, I mean, it's such a fundamental change to your life. I was lucky that I told them I was depressed before I told them I was trans. Mm-hmm. Because, like, when I was, like, a teenager, like, and we'll get into that later, and sorry, this is kind of heavy, but, like, I talked about it a lot. At this point, my parents were just like, whatever, just don't kill yourself. Like, be whatever you want. Yeah. There was very low...
Yeah, my mom got to that point too. She was like,
just like, whatever you want.
As long as you're a good person, I could not care. Like, the
be
bar
a good
is on
person,
the floor, you know?
Be a good person and don't yourself and we're solid. With me, it wasn't so much that I felt like a necessity to carry on the family name. My family wasn't big on legacy so much as they were always just big on being a good person and being kind to people. Because my family's always thought highly of me, even when I was like not the most like masculine kid growing up. I was never pressured into doing it because my dad is like a man's man. Because he can like fish and hunt and he can fix shit, but he also hates sports. And my grandfather always made him play sports and he always hated it. So when he was like, when I didn't want to do that, he was like, yeah, totally, that's fine if you don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. He never pressured me into stuff. None of my parents did. So I was always lucky that I wasn't forced into like gender roles.
Yeah.
But my anxiety was that like I was kind of in a comfortable position in my family because I have like because I kind of have the perfect nuclear family.
Yeah.
I have a mom and a dad. I have an older sister, and then there's me. And I kind of was the boy.
Yeah.
Right? Because like my sister, I mean, I say we weren't big on like gendered stuff, but at the end of the day, like my dad did bring me fishing more than he brought my sister. I did go solo camping with him where my sister did not. I did go shooting guns with him or hunting when my sister didn't.
Yeah.
There was different, like, my dad wanted to show me stuff about, like, history and military, whereas he never did that with my sister.
It's kind of like you're afraid that the bond you have with that person when it's so
Yes.
heavily relied on those gendered activities will somehow be like in jeopardy. Like you still enjoy all those things. Nothing changes about that.
It doesn't necessarily. Well, I was never crazy about fishing, I have to be honest with
fishing
you.
is boring.
Well, at the end of the day, my dad's also like, yeah, fishing fucking sucks. I can't do it anymore. I lost the patience for it. My dad's hilarious, but I was worried because I had a good life, right? I was a comfortable, and I didn't want to fuck that up.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was caused because very early on, I don't know what this person is doing now, and they have apologized from it since, but we did just kind of like move on from one another.
Mm-hmm.
But I had come out to, the second person I came out to was another friend that I was very close to around that time when I was a teenager. And I told her, it's like, oh, I'm trans, and she took it really poorly when it was just like, no, you're not, or my memories of it are a little foggy because I think I was so like traumatized and scared by it that it's a little, but I just remember it not going well, and we just stopped talking until I think, she apologized and we had a kind of truce, so it was sort of awkward, and so we didn't talk about it afterwards. But it was like someone that I did, and she was bi, and she seemed fairly like a nice person, so I didn't expect that from her. So I think that kind of blows a hole in your ship, right? Where you're just like, I'm taking on water, and I don't know if I can trust people, because like I think my parents will be okay with this, but also will they? Because I'll be disrupting this kind of healthy balance that we have. And I think that was probably that kind of growing anxiety, that and with the general anxiety of the second you learn you're trans, you get hooked into trans issues and you're suddenly very aware. I go from thinking that like, oh, trans people are just like people. I don't think of it as a bad thing. I think of it as a benign thing, to being exposed and being hyper vigilant of a world where people don't like trans people. And so suddenly, like, it was the burden of knowledge of knowing you're trans, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, people fucking hate me, and my parents might just kick me out. And so I think that kept me pretty solidly in the closet until like fairly recently. Last year, it was 2020 that I think it was 2019. I think I first told my mom, but it was kind of in a very like, yeah, that happened, but I never did it, like, formally.
Because I do remember there was a time when you were like, my birthday is coming, I'm gonna do it. Then you didn't. Then it was the next time.
But yeah, that was my general kind of, to where I am now, where, like, I started, like, a formal medical transition in December 1st, 2020. And so, as of recording, it's like 7 months, I think?
Yeah.
I'm in deep. So, yeah. It works out, mostly. I still haven't told a lot of my family members. I suspect I will come, like, July. It's just so awkward.
So, for me, as I already kind of explained, like, I didn't really think anything about, like, being bi, right? I sort of explained, like, it kind of happened in high school. I sort of realized, oh, well, not everybody's the same as me. Oops, right? That's basically how I can summarize it is, oh, I didn't realize that.
I remember in high school when I first met you and you told me you were bi, I asked you how you figured it out, and you literally gave me that, like, I don't know, I just always assumed I was.
Yeah.
I thought everybody was. Like, that was the explanation
and so,
that you gave me.
Like, with more of the, like, gender stuff, like, for me, I kind of went through, like, different phases, and so I was, like, very girly as a child. And then in elementary school, I had that, like, dark hoodie, keeping your hair up in a ponytail, like, one of the bros, I'm a tomboy, and I feel like that there's a very fine line, probably, like, I feel like that to some extent, it, like, part of it must be rooted or influenced just by, like, you know, oh, well, being super feminine's bad and stuff. And I know that, like, people don't necessarily like to talk about that because it's sometimes complicated to say, oh, well, you know, I think I'm this because of these direct events, because I know that, like, for some people, they feel like that they're born that way, and that's fine. But I feel like that a lot of what contributed for me was just, like, the not necessarily the upbringing, but I guess what I was exposed to. Like, if somebody had never said that being, like, feminine was kind of a negative thing, or, like, a thing that you can't be strong at, I probably wouldn't feel that need, because with that sort of, like, twist thing that I'm talking about, I did notice, like, oh, I want to sing guy songs. I want to wear guy clothes. And I think some of that definitely stemmed from, well, guys have better songs. Guys have, you know, like, you're more powerful, especially on stage, because, and, like, Hunter knows this, like, I have sung so many boy songs that I'm quote-unquote not allowed to sing. Like, my vocal teacher and I, we work on them, but you wouldn't be able to take them to an audition. You wouldn't, because, like, you don't do that, right? You can sing them, and, like, I love that.
Please don't sing the Gaston song,
exactly,
Taylor.
like, I feel like that, you know, it's been a trend on YouTube, like, gender-bent song covers, right? Like, you have Anna Pantsu doing Prince Ali, and Friends on the Other Side, and all these, like, guy songs, and I think that I started doing it before I saw those, but when I saw that was happening, I was like, yes, I love that. And so it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. Like, did I sort of, like, start to feel this way because of that, or did I already feel this way and it just kind of manifested in all these different things? I don't really know. But that's how I sort of feel about that. And so I kind of, not flip-flop, but I guess that is what gender fluid is, right? Sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. But, like, you know, I had a very, like, goth phase, and, like, some of that was more, like, masculine clothing and stuff like that. I had a more, like, frilly phase, and, like, that's basically where I am now. It's just, like, I kind of just dress however I want. I've looked into, like, some male wigs. Somebody actually asked about my wigs and how it started. I feel like that it didn't necessarily start with the gender stuff, but more just identity in general. Like, the colors that we associate with certain things, like, oh, you know, red hair, that's, like, sexy or whatever. So I feel like that it started there, but it definitely kind of snowballed into a little gay thing, if that makes sense. Like, oh, yeah, I want my blue wig back because that's, like, powerful and cool, and, like, with the side shave, that's very gay, right? And so, right, when you think about it that way, it just kind of makes sense why I, like, devolved into the wigs, I guess, because that's, you can change and look however you want. I feel like that at the core, that's kind of, like, what gender fluid is to me. Exactly. Yes. You want, you know, you can look in many different ways. In terms of being bi, so as Hunter was alluding to earlier, I did not, like, come out in any capacity, but, like, I don't think that I need to, you know what I mean? It's sort of a weird thing to explain. It's just something that I've never felt like I've had to do.
You've also never dated someone who everyone around, I mean, I guess for a bit there we had dated, and I was not out in trans, and even now I don't think a lot of people notice that. And I mean, obviously you're dating Arnold. Yeah. But, like, you've never dated a woman.
So it hasn't really been a necessity, but I feel like I still wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? I feel like I'd just be like, hello, everyone. This is my girlfriend. Thank you. No further questions. And then just, like, you know. But there was a time when we had started making YouTube videos, and we were sort of deciding what kind of content we wanted to make. And we were making videos about Riverdale, which was very weird now that I think about it. And we were making, like, Riverdale videos. Yeah, we made two of them.
It was new, and we watched the episode, and we were both like, this is the weirdest shit any
and
of
then
us
we were like, oh, actually, this is kind of, like, cheesy, you know, we don't really want to make videos about this. So it was kind of, like, it's funny now in, like, an awful way, but I guess, like, my dad was watching all my videos or something, and he called my mom one night and was like, do you know that Cal is talking about girls on her YouTube channel? Because I think that, you know, like, this is something else that I definitely want to talk about, but I think that back in the day, more so than we are now, we were very, like sex jokes. I would like to screw that like, I feel like that sometimes, like, we have the furry joke, whatever, but I feel like back in the day, especially as teenagers, we were a bit more like, this is the top or bottom, this is the dom or sub video of Ruby Cat, like, we did do videos that way, and I feel like that for me, that's just because, you know, I thought that was cool, I thought that that's what you had to be, you know what I mean? Like, I have a lot of bad associations with, oh, you know, you can't be too feminine, you can't be a prude, if you're vanilla, vanilla, that's like not, you know, not cool or whatever. Like people, especially guys, want you to be sexy. They don't want you to be like prude and like frilly. But that's really kind of who I am, is a little prude and frilly, you know?
It's the oh god, I forget the name of the character from The Breakfast Club, but she talks about that exact, if you're too sexual, you're a slut, but if you're not sexual, you're a prude.
Exactly.
And so it's an impossible balance.
I felt very much prude, and so I was trying to be like the cool girl that made the sex jokes and talked about bottoms on YouTube or something. You know what I mean? Talked about BDSM.
You kind of do that,
like,
though.
Sometimes, but I think it more so now it's of my own volition, whereas before it was sort of like a peer pressure thing. Like even I think of conversations I had with people, like even my friends, and I'm like, well, I would never say that. Like I would never talk about that.
I think it's also
now,
like
you know?
being a teenager, you're discovering that stuff, so you're more likely to have to bounce ideas off of people.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're like a young adult into your 20s, you're kind of more settled into like,
exactly.
oh, I have a better
and your own
understanding
identity and like how you actually feel. And so like a lot of I think up to like 19 or 20, like I was very much pressured into like, you have to be, you know, like, and I feel like that it was really, I think changing my profile picture to be more princessy just gave me more confidence that like, it's okay to just be that, you know what I mean? Whatever you want. And so, yeah, we'll talk about that another day, but I've talked about that on Twitter a couple times. It's like, you can like whatever you want, but I hope that young people don't feel pressured, because I constantly see these memes and it's like, if you don't like being choked, you're vanilla. And I'm just like, well, no, like, you know, just leave people alone, like, it's okay. And so you know, that really got into my head.
But
and
that's
I thought,
also
like, my friends need to think I'm cool. My friends need to think I'm kinky or whatever, which isn't necessarily related to this, but I'll get to that. So I guess in the video, we had said something like, damn, she's so hot. Like, I'd love to fuck her.
I think what the thing was that there was a faux lesbian makeout scene in the first episode of Riverdale.
We were probably talking about that. So back to, you know, the phone. So, you know, he had told my mom that, and so my mom had texted me that, and and I was just trying to kind of play it off. I was like, well, Mom, you know, we were making video, and she was like, yeah, but, you know, you said that you wanted to fuck her. She wasn't, like, upset or anything about it. She was more upset that he had called to tell her this. It was like 11 o'clock at night. I don't know how to explain it, but it was kind of just like, you know, like, oh, don't try to play it off. Like, I know what you said, but it's not really that big of a deal. I'm more upset that I got a phone call about this. Like, this is this is for no reason. And so I was upset, obviously, because I feel like, first of all, that's kind of a breach of trust. That's like reading, like, your kid's fan fiction. You know what I mean? Like, you just don't do that, right? Like, I know it's a YouTube video and it was public, but at the same time, it's like, you hear all these, like, oh yeah, my parent doesn't watch my YouTube videos, right? Because, like, you know, there's a barrier there, especially with fan content.
I think it's fair to have boundaries with people.
And so I was like so mad, and like I just was like, you know, I'm not talking to you ever again. And that's where we left off with that. I don't have hatred, but I just don't want to deal. I don't want to deal with it. So I haven't really come out because I haven't really like had to, but I feel like that if I did, it would be fine, right? And the other thing is like, I do weird shit all the time and nobody ever questions it. You know what I mean?
You showed up one day with blue hair and your grandfather didn't even notice.
I've dressed like very masculine before and nobody ever says anything. And so I feel like that ultimately I'm in a very like weird position in that regard, but I feel like that like the position I'm in is also fine. Like I feel like that my family doesn't particularly care one way or the other or whatever, and so I'm just kind of like, I'm just cruising, I guess.
That was how I was like with my parents before I like came out to them, because like when I was doing it, I'm so bad at talking to myself, and I have this terrible habit of whenever I talk about it I start crying. It's not a good look, because people are like, oh my god, is it okay, like did someone die? It's like, no, it's fine, I don't know why, I'm an emotional person. But with them, my dad was just like, he kind of knew where it was going. So it's like, is there something you want to share with us?
What would you like to share
at a certain point,
class?
it's just like, Hunter, we know you shave your legs. It's not going to be surprising with your painted nails and your women's clothing that you wear that you're trans. That's not a shock for us.
I think that we're lucky in that sense, right? I think that we understand that. I still have like a little fear. And my mom's she's become very aware too, and I think that has something to do with like fandom and stuff that she's in, you know. She was just like,
and also, like,
what pronouns do I put in my email? And she was like, what pronouns should I use for Hunter? And even my vocal teacher the other day was like, is Hunter transitioning? And I was like, yes. Is the name Hunter still okay? And I was like, yes. What are Hunter's pronouns? And I was like, they, that, and like, you know what I mean? And so it was very polite, like it was very straightforward, to the point, and like very supportive. And I was like, oh, well, that's nice, because like my vocal teacher has been the same teacher for like the past 8 years, so she knows we're friends. Yeah. Like she basically knows my entire life story, you know?
I've been in musical theater too long to not be able to point out a fruit when I see one. You often feel like you need to like assert yourself as being queer.
Only in, and I guess we'll get into that, only in fandom. And so I think that we should go through some of the questions first, because I did make like a fandom question category. And so, well, first let's answer this. So we've all heard of gender dysmorphia, but what's the best memory you had with gender euphoria? I think that that's a really cute question. And then so, you know, now that we've kind of explained everything.
I think people pathologize being transgender a lot. I feel like people like to imagine it as like a kind of illness that you have, and that the way you treat it is you go on blockers, or you have surgery, or you get a wig, or you wear a dress, or you get a binder, or you wear like et cetera, et cetera. And it's, for a while it's even in the DSM-5, and I disagree with that. Because there are some trans people that don't experience like dysphoria, but they do, like, so it's not a universal experience, but I think like gender.
Did I say dysmorphia? What did I say?
Dysphoria. Dysphoria
sorry.
Is when you dislike your gender.
Yeah.
But I feel like gender euphoria is a more universal experience of being like, oh, I like this a lot more.
Yeah. Or like, I look hot. Like, it's kind of like good. That, but different. It's like, I look hot specifically in that, you know, like in that gender, I think. I have this picture where I guess I had tied up my hair for the day, and I have like a baseball cap on and like just this gray shirt, and I just love how I look in that
photo.
Picture. That's a very like masculine
I feel the same way with the photos that we took for the Oscars. I felt very like I was like on cloud 9 for the rest of the day. Yeah. Something terrible happened. Something really shitty happened later that day, and I was just like, I was having a good time. Or like even little things, like little acknowledgements, like feeling good for yourself. Yeah. I remember the first time wearing women's clothing and being able to walk out, and it was very subtle, and I don't think people even noticed. But I noticed, and it was like, ooh, secret happy. Or like, it was, oh God, it was probably even when I grew my hair out, and I got my haircut for the first time, so it was all like evened, and I'm like, oh, this really worked for me.
I kind of have a system that isn't necessarily like related to that exactly, but I have a system where it's like, if I'm recording, I put on my tiara. If I'm working on a script, I tie up my hair and I put on my glasses. Like I have certain, like, I don't know how to explain, like just activating
you
items,
just feel better,
right?
Certain...
you know, like, and so I feel like that sort of crosses over. But I always like the feeling of when I feel that twist, looking at an item of clothing, and then I pick another one, and I'm like, no, you're the right item. It's like you just feel like that's the right item for the day. It's like that little scene in Tinkerbell where the talent's finally glowing. It's like, oh, like you are the right choice today, I guess.
I can't remember the name of it. It was either a short story or a short comic, and the premise of the comic was that before your 21st birthday, everyone has two bodies. They can switch out, a masculine and a feminine one. And at your 21st birthday, like the one that you don't want anymore, you can discard and dissolve. And the idea of choosing and picking, it just reminded me a lot of that. I saw that and I'm just like, God, that would be a lovely society to find yourself in. But it does kind of feel that way sometimes of like, am I going to like make conscious efforts to like feel better about myself? Yeah. And for so long, it was like a conscious effort to feel better about yourself and having to weigh that against worrying about other people right? and how they view you. And
I think that's why too cosplay can sort of be a undercover. I'm not like actually I'm just cosplaying as a guy, or I'm just cosplaying.
I have ironically, before realizing I was trans, cross-dressed a lot.
And so, yeah, it's one of those things where, no, like, this is just for a video, right? And so there are kind of, like, those different things, too, like, with cosplay.
I think it's also acknowledgement from other people. Like, I was at a Michael's with my mom, like, yesterday, because things just opened up. We had a tie-dye kit. My dad loves tie-dye stuff, because he's just the strangest human being alive. And we were going to tie-dye shirts, and she was picking our shirts, and it was just like, what shirts do you want, Hunter? Like, what size? I'm just like, I don't know. I think I want it in a different cut. And I didn't even say, like, a woman's cut. Yeah. And she was like, oh, and paused. And I'm like, well, there's some women's shirts over there that were white and that you could tie-dye. And just that, like, small bit of acknowledgement. Yeah. I didn't cry into Michael's, but I almost cried into Michael's because I'm very emotional about these sorts of things. Yeah. But, yeah, it's just, I think acknowledgement from other people and doing things for yourself are two things that give me a lot of that euphoria.
And so somebody did actually ask, like, how does the Ruby fandom perceive you because of your sexuality? Oh, I know what you said. You said the only, like, in what times do you feel like you have to assert yourself as queer? I think that you said something like that. The only time I ever feel like I have to do that is online, because there's just that inherent, you're not gay enough, right? Or you don't have the right to speak on this, like, sort of thing. And so, you know, like, I feel like that's almost not the only reason, but that's, like, a big reason why I have, like, stuff like ADHD and Genderfluid in my bio, because it's, like, if it's not there, people will just attack you and be like, well, you're straight, how would you know, right? And so that's the only time I've ever felt, because at least then, you know, there's a wall of defense almost, because, like, just because you're gay does not mean your takes are automatically good. But at the same time, there is a level with people online where the same take from a straight person is different
like,
than the same take from a gay person.
I'm like, I'm not
exactly, right? And
like,
so that's something that I felt a lot, was just like, you know, these people, they are diminishing, like, my opinion, and I don't think that they would do that if they knew that I was bi. And, like, to an extent, it was true, right? Like, I started to say the exact same things, and then it's like, you know, well, move out of the way. Calxiyn's bi, so it's almost like now I have the right? And so it's like, you know, it still happens, because in that pocket, right, first of having to assert yourself as gay to kind of get the respect of other gay people who kind of, like, you know, have that mentality, well, then even that, like, some people don't think that bi is good enough. Yeah, and like I am in a lot of fandoms, and to be clear, I don't think this is just a Ruby fandom problem. However, given the presence of, like, bisexual characters within the show, or at least, like, characters who seem to be bisexual, I feel like the biphobia is just generally more rampant, because people talk about it in the context of, like, Blake, but then you don't realize you're actually hurting our feelings, right? And so I feel like, you know, I'm sure that there's problems in Kingdom Hearts and Persona, but I guess it's just because, like, I'm in the Ruby fandom so much more, right? But at the same time, nobody has ever questioned, like, me making a Miraculous video about gay characters, you know? Nobody's ever said anything in the Miraculous fandom to me, so it's just a very different... Because
they're all French.
I guess.
They're bisexual anyways.
And so it's just a very different experience.
Oh, you fuck women! You think you're so special! You have a cigarette!
But it's definitely just one of those things
people are like, right?
where it's like, yes, we'll keep it in. It's definitely one of those things where it's like, okay, well, you need to assert online in a fandom space that you are gay enough, or we will not listen or engage with you. And I find that that's not everyone by any means. However, it was enough. It was enough for me to put everything in my butt. But I understand that comes from a place of, like, cis people or heterosexual people basically, like, having a take and it being bad, you know what I mean? Like, I understand where, like, the wariness comes from, basically, because they're just, like, you know, like, people outside of our community don't understand us in the fandom
But also, people
context,
inside the community have pretty bad takes sometimes.
Exactly, so it's, like, you know, it's like, both
queer
ways.
People
right?
are a diverse group, and, like, no one queer person can say to speak, including us here, can say to speak definitively on people.
And so, like, I do think that inherently, if you are a part of the community and you're talking about the identity that you're, like, I feel like that Hunter's discussion of May being trans would inherently be a bit more educated than Arnold's let's just
Sure.
say, right? Because I'm comfortable saying that. I would put Hunter above Arnold in that regard, kind of, right? But at the same time,
you probably shouldn't take me as the
you're not
universal
word of
voice.
God,
Yeah.
right? You're a bit more of an educated perspective, but not the singular educated perspective to go by. And I feel like that's really important.
Yes.
And so when I feel like, I feel like that there's just a line, and it's like, yeah, like, I get it, because there have been some YouTubers that have had bad takes on May being trans, because they don't know anything. And so, of course, you want to sort of, like, be like, hey, like, listen to an actual trans person. At the same time, the community is also not a monolith,
So
and
it's
so
better,
you can't rely on
better,
one single trans person. You should get a bunch of opinions.
I think that's
right?
the really easy way that people go. They just, like, listen to a person from that group, especially if they're not familiar with, like, I think the best option is to like, have an actual, like, rebuttal or explanation of, like, well, this is why I disagree with this.
Yeah.
Take. Also, people are just really mean to bi people. I've noticed that a lot.
And so,
like,
I feel really meaned too.
Like, I don't know, I hang out with a lot of bi people. Like, not even I mean, I hang out with you a lot, but, like, even people I know from school and other friends, they're just, for some reason,
it's funny how you say purposefully, because somebody actually said, do you think birds of a feather flock together?
I really do think they are.
Yeah.
Because all these friends I've made in university, and, like, half of them are bi. They're all bi women, and, like, they've experienced with, like, lesbians or straight men finding out they're bi and just not wanting anything to do with them, because it's, like, icky. You think that it's almost like being too gay for the straight kids and too straight for the gays.
And so I only have ever experienced that, unfortunately, either with somebody quote tweeting a bad take on Twitter or in the RWBY fandom. And I guess, again, if I talked in other fandoms frequently, I'm sure that it would happen. But I think that there's just something fierce going on within RWBY specifically. Sometimes there is a lot of unnecessary infighting that just shouldn't be there, right?
Yeah,
so
I also feel, I don't know, just from my take, is that I often feel like to be trans is to just feel like an interloper.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a trans man, you don't feel like you're totally welcome into the man group. If you're a trans woman, you don't feel like you're entirely welcome. Yeah, fucking, oh god, they give me nightmares. And you feel like you need to engage with it, to have, like, a mental repertoire of, like, Uno reverse cards of, like, well, I'm actually, when people, like, do go at you. But yeah, it's like, I just don't feel like I'm invited to the club a lot of the time, because I am a trans woman, but even saying that out loud feels weird. I just feel like I'm not invited to the club, and I don't feel like I'm nervous to, like, say that out loud, because I feel like I'm encroaching into a place where I'm not welcome.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm like, I do go by she, her pronouns. I'm fine with they, them. I do go by she, her. But I don't think I've ever corrected a single soul other than someone whom I'm intensely comfortable with. Like, my partner.
Because I didn't even know that. You didn't tell me.
Yeah, I don't.
You didn't tell me that.
I know, and it's not your fault. It's literally my own, like, nerves with me. It's not a preference. I don't want people to say that, but I would never in a million years feel comfortable saying no. Actually, because I just feel so, like, I don't want to crack open that, like, I don't know. I just don't want.
When we're ready, we'll update your pronouns on the bio.
I mean, I'm fine if you reput that. You could change that now, honestly. But it's because that's so passive. But, like, I'm not very. I've never been very.
You've
forceful,
never been coming out party.
Or I've
whereas
never been
I've been like, Hunter,
party.
let's do a coming out party.
Because I just feel like so much of an interloper, and it's the same thing where it's like I'm attracted to some men in a very limited capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm mostly attracted to women.
It's like all women, sometimes like 1% man. That's how I feel too.
And it's like, but it's like I'm mostly attracted to women, but, like, the idea of calling myself a lesbian is terrifying to me, because I don't feel welcome under that. Mm-hmm. And, like, a lot of lesbians are really lovely people. It's a very, very, very small minority of lesbians that are exclusionary to trans people. Mm-hmm. But they exist, and I feel like an interloper, and it's not even that I don't think I have a place there. I do think I and other trans women have a place there. I just feel so anxious about having to, like, stake a claim or be forceful or be like, no, I am a lesbian or I am a woman. It's dumb. I should assert myself, and I do in certain very, very limited capacities, but I feel so anxious about it. And so when you talk about, like, feeling excluded. It's not even that other people exclude me. It's just I'm worried that they're going to exclude me, so I exclude myself prematurely.
Yeah.
I think there's an extent to myself that I do feel non-binary, if I'm entirely honest. But like, that's a whole other can of worms, because there's the most insightful thing I ever heard a straight person say about queer people was Dave Chappelle, the comedian. And he said, everyone thinks that it's one acronym, like everyone's in the car together.
Yeah.
Like it's LGBT. Nobody likes nobody. The gay people don't like the lesbians. None of those people like the trans people. Nobody likes the bisexuals. The binary trans people don't like
We're not all in the same car.
We're not all in the same car.
So
We
now,
don't actually really like each other that much. And it kind of feels that way where like it can be nerve-wracking to assert yourself as like, hey, I'm trans, but I also kind of feel non-binary. That
so
you don't
are
know
you
about.
afraid now, like, you're like, okay, well, I've already been excluded from here,
Yeah.
here. Now I don't want to be excluded from the trans binary
people. There are people who are like, they think that like, oh, we can be okay if we convince them that we're the good trans people.
Yeah.
And we're not the bad trans people that can't pick a fucking gender.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like those people who I worry about, and I don't know, I think I'm just inundated by like the worst takes and like the opinions of the worst people.
That's why I try not, like, I don't follow anything activist related anymore. And I know that I should, and I know like Cal, you have a platform, you have a responsibility, but like when it's damaging your own mental health at the expense of what? Because I feel like that most of the activism doesn't even go into really helping you. It's kind of like to appease other people anyway, right?
Especially
and so,
social media, like slacktivism as it sometimes.
And so sometimes I'm just like, but what about like my mental health? Like like, oh, Cal, you should post about this, but I'm the one involved in a sense, like if it's something bisexual related, right? But I'm the one in there, and I'm telling you I don't want to talk about it, right? Like I've had enough,
It's made me a little neurotic, I think, that I'm worried I'm gonna find people who are shitty. But in my experiences with hanging out with other queer people, like they've all been lovely. Like people are. That's my like most people are nice, and at the end of the day people might have issues with me because I'm trans or whatever reason. At the end of the day I can't control that, and I think moving on to a transition where I'm going to be like very visibly trans for a while, Lord knows I'll probably never pass, but I'll just have to accept that, like, Hunter, you just have to be a good person. And at the end of the day, if people have issues with you and you know you're being a good person, or at least you're trying to be a good person, you can't let that bother you. You can only try to be the best person you can be. And that's I guess that's what I take forward in a world that is not friendly all the time.
What character from an anime or animated shows do you associate more when it comes to LGBT characters or like themes, I guess? I'll just add themes in there.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to do a video on this soon.
And somebody else said, what do you think is the best way for LGBT rep to present in the media? And those are very loaded, interesting questions.
I think Penny is kind of, we're going to do a video on this, so I won't go into detail, but I think she's very trans-coded, and I do, even though she's not like capital T trans, I do like her character a lot.
It's kind of like Little Mermaid. It's like there's something in there.
There's something there.
But it's not like official, I guess you could say, right?
I really do like May. I do think she's a very interesting character. As for like my favorite trans character in media, it's from a book called Dreadnought of a Nemesis series.
Let's see if anybody knows.
If any of you know it, good for you. It's a great series. I highly recommend it. There's 2 books with a 3rd on the way. They're desperately favorite. It has a similar plot than Hero Academia, where a young girl gets like the powers from the last guy who was basically their All Might who dies.
Oh, okay.
But the thing is that when you get the power, it turns you into your ideal self. So she transitions.
Oh, that's
And so it's
cool.
it's like a trans superhero story, and it's very interesting. And
I like that.
Yeah, I don't know if trans people will like it as much as I do, or like non-trans people will get it as much, because it is very much so a trans power fantasy of like being trans Superman or Superwoman in her case. But I think that's my favorite representation in a piece of media.
I'm gonna go with a unconventional answer and say characters that I associate are probably not gay. Like, other than like Disney villains, obviously, like that's coded.
Oh, Scar's a little fruity.
Exactly. And so basically a lot of Disney villains, they're a little gay. Ariel, I mean, like the mermaid metaphor, you could take a look at that and take it however you want.
There's
also
trans
like,
charity
you're a human, they're a mermaid, you know what I mean? Or whatever, like Eric's a human, right? Like all of that sort of stuff. Like you can't be together. So like
He's straight.
There's many ways to unpack that, I guess you could say, right? I feel like though, like Barbie is just gay, and there's a couple of videos about why, and I feel like that when you have something inherently that's from the female gaze instead of the male gaze, you tend to get a lot of accidental gay. Like, there's a Barbie movie, I was watching another video on this just in my, like, Barbie video essay, you know, like, a research, I guess, to see what other people were saying, and apparently there's a Barbie movie where there's two male, like, they're supposed to be love interests, but then at the end they just fuck off. Like, nobody gets married. There's two girls, they live in a cottage together, and they get flowers together and make jam all day or something. I haven't watched this movie,
Cottage-core lesbians. They knew what they were doing.
Right, they were basically saying that these guys are supposed to be love interests, but they don't do shit. They don't get married, they just, like, leave or something at the end of the movie. I don't know how true that is, but I think generally Barbie's just a little gay. Like, there's some gay stuff going on
there.
with
like
Barbie
with Penny,
characters.
It's coding.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot to mention this earlier, but that's something else that I did that I just, like, didn't really think about, is I always put my Barbies together. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I always put my girl Barbies together, and there were no questions asked, but that's, especially, like, Erica and Annalise from Princess and the Pauper, I was like, well, screw those guys. You guys are, you know, you guys are the ship. You guys are together. But yeah, that's basically, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
In my very formative years, and still read a lot of gay fan fiction.
But yeah, there's definitely some anime where I'm just like, you're not gay, but you're gay to me, you know? Like, you're or like cartoons or Disney, even Disney princesses like Elsa and stuff. Like, they're just like, I'm just like Anna, you seem a little bi to me. I don't know what. Like, there's just stuff like that, right? But in terms of, like, the best way for rep to be included, I feel like that, like, Mate or, like, stuff like She-Ra is a good example.
Oh, I forgot about She-Ra.
Yeah, you
Freaking
forgot
Catcher
about
and
She-Ra.
She-Ra are amazing.
And so I feel like that the best way is kind of like, I don't know how to explain this, but, like, there's a time and place for, like, a coming out identity crisis story, but I feel like that's not always, like, what everything needs to be. I think that, like, I prefer sort of, like, natural inclusion, but also addressing it. You know what I mean? Kind of like what they did in Ruby, right? And so I feel like that way is my personal favorite, and then also if it's written by someone who's actually queer or they were consulted, that's pretty
I think that's
pretty
good. Although, I mean, I have liked stuff with queer characters that was not written by queer people.
Yeah.
I do enjoy that, although I think my favorite stuff is stuff written by trans or queer people. I think for me, it kind of get what you were getting at. There's either
it's like, I don't want everything to be a crisis.
Coming out story.
I want,
not
like,
everything
sometimes
has
things
to be
should
Love,
be
Simon.
Powerful. You know what I mean? Like you were saying with the book that you're reading, right?
Yeah.
So
not everything, but that is still. I mean, it's a book about superheroes and people saving the world and like a lot of other things. But it is also a book about being trans. But like, not every book or thing with a trans character in it needs necessarily to be a book about trans people.
Yeah.
I mean, it inevitably will. I'm not saying it. I don't want it to be like totally. I don't want the like J.K. Rowling like Dumbledore was gay the whole time. I'm okay with subtext. I like subtext quite a bit. You know, I think that it should be at least addressed in some capacity. But I am okay. I do like when like a character's just queer and there doesn't have to be a reason, because people are just queer and there isn't a reason. We just exist.
Yeah, and so with Ruby, that's something that I really like. You know,
and I like that, but I also do like when like characters are queer and it's like a thing. Yeah. Where it's like it is a book where people talk about queer identity or it is explored. And I think, to an extent, queer identity is explored in She-Ra, but it's done in a way where it's not like an abnormal thing. In that universe, being queer is very normal. So in a sense, I think we need a healthy dose of everything. It's very invested in its queer characters, and it's very obvious that it's queer. But it's not like, it's not about living in our society and our struggles, or like people struggling to imagine themselves as being queer or coming to terms or coming out. There's like value both ways. Yeah. Right? And so I feel like that both yes, we still do need coming out stories or like I call them identity crisis, but that's probably not, exactly, but like, identity based stories. So it's just like
we need everything that straight people already have. You have movies where there is an internal crisis of I'm not good enough, I'm not this, I'm not that for like straight characters. Like the first thing I can think of is there's that Barbie movie that has the fairy and the girl doesn't have wings and like she's really concerned about it, but then like even though she doesn't have wings, she saves the day anyway. Like she can do something no one else can. Like there's definitely some gay coding in there too also.
Yeah.
But or you know, some other stuff. But you know, like we need a mixture of like the internal conflict and then the like external, and I would say that She-Ra falls under you're gay, but there's an external conflict like that, you know, has nothing to do with you, I guess, you know what I mean? That has nothing
like
to do with it.
She-Ra is a queer story that's not about being queer.
Yeah.
And I think there's queer stories about being queer and queer stories not about being queer.
Yeah.
And I think both are equally valid.
Exactly.
As for corporate pride, I just think it's really lame.
Well, it's so funny because, like, obviously I have a pride profile picture, but I feel like that's different because when I saw that question, I was like, well, didn't we do that? But not really. We're gay 24/7.
Yeah, I'm gay 24/7.
You know what I mean? We're gay
Yeah.
365 days of the year. It's just, you know, I
I'm not
want to
doing
change
it.
my profile picture.
I just think it's
for the month, you know? It's like
you also do it for Halloween and Christmas.
And so it's just one of those things where it's like, on one hand, I mean, I don't see myself as a corporation, though. I know what this person means. Like, corporations that want to seem like they're supportive, but they're just, like, performative. They're just doing something lazy. They're just changing their profile
pic, It does bother me
right?
a lot, because, like, a lot of these people are run by organizations who support right-wing campaigns.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, they really don't care about you. They care about profit margins and trans people or queer people in general, just like every other demographic, is
money, right?
As one that they can be like, oh, we can have a pride collection and that can be a thing, or we can have like, I went to PetSmart, they had a pride collection at PetSmart. I mean, I did have a pug once that I was pretty sure was a lesbian, but it's not. You know, it just seems kind of like, I'm just very cynical about it, especially because most of these rich people that are on the boards that run these companies support like very right-wing politicians because they will lower their taxes and they also attack queer people.
The only good people that have pride-related profile pictures are us. Like, you know what I mean? Like, not just
like
us as in us, but like, you know what I mean?
Or like small
anyone...
queer organizations.
Exactly,
or like I don't know, like I follow bands who put that stuff. Or
exactly.
And I'm like, like an indie band with queer members, I'm totally okay.
Or like if She-Ra's gonna change their logo or something.
She-Ra is a
was
show
already rainbow.
That's like run by a non-binary lesbian.
Exactly. And
with a bunch of canonically queer characters and also like queer voice talent. Like,
so yeah, basically what I'm saying is that, you know, I think that it's in our case, like in the case of like queer people,
like YouTubers
or like
is totally
clearly fine. Like, you know, people that support like actual like LGBT people, like those profile pics, I'm like, you're great.
Yeah.
Otherwise I'm just like, well, that's pretty, but it's useless.
And I understand that there's individual cogs of the machine that are rainbow, and I respect their right to be rainbow. I think the machine in general is not rainbow.
Fair.
It's green. Because it wants money. And I also feel like instead of freaking out over whenever like these big production companies give you this tiniest slice of like gay content, you can actually go to like actual queer creatives who are like in independent queer bands. Like instead of obsessing over whether or not fucking Billie Eilish is bi or not, actually go out, which she's entirely right to her freedom, or like Taylor Swift, her business, or Taylor Swift, or all these people that people think are bi or not. They're totally like they can have their privacy. It doesn't make them less bi or whatever if that's the case. But instead of focusing over these big people, find smaller queer artists that are queer. Find smaller queer comic book writers or novelists or video game makers or movie makers. There's a lot of great queer film. Instead of like frothing at the mouth to big corporations that don't care about you, support the community you're a part of.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And I think that's my rebuttal to like...
And it's us. Support us on Patreon.
And that's subtly to be like, you know who's a queer YouTuber?
Yeah. So somebody asked, do you believe that as an LGBTQ person, one has any inherent obligation to uphold or promote any ideological viewpoint? Which I thought was a very like deep and interesting question.
Personally, to be queer is to be on in most situations, the outs.
Yeah.
And I think that it's imperative of all people to be worried about people in the margins of society and care about how power is balanced in a society and look out for people and to protect one another and to create a more equitable society. I think that's imperative on all people. I think it's especially true on queer people. I think a lot of people describe themselves as apolitical.
Yeah.
And I think that's honestly a bit of privilege to call yourself apolitical.
Yeah.
Because you're only apolitical until politics. Like, you might not do politics, but politics do you.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that politics is doing you, that's a privilege, because you're probably in like a position in society where you have money, or you're in Canada, you're white, or you're straight, or you're a man, or you're of a dominant religious.
Yeah.
You know, you're in a dominant, and you don't notice when politics are doing to you. When you're lower down the rung, and we're not even like, we're queer, but like we're, you know, educated, we're in a good household, we're white people.
Yeah.
Like, you could be like lower down the socioeconomic totem pole than we are. You feel that more. You feel politics doing you more.
Yeah.
So I don't think that anybody is truly apolitical.
Or they shouldn't be. Yeah,
I don't think anybody
it's like
is
nobody's
apolitical.
You just don't care. Like,
People aren't apolitical. They're just ambivalent towards the world and how power affects people. And you're probably only ambivalent because it doesn't affect you.
Yeah.
The second people curtail your rights, or people talk about you in a way you dislike, suddenly you realize, like, oh no, I am political.
Yeah. And I think that the only place where I'm like, where the wall is, I guess, is if it's like impacting your mental health in a capacity where you go on Twitter and like it just ruins you, like every day, like there's something like totally stressing you out and messing up your mental health. I think that in that case, you don't necessarily have the obligation to put yourself through that, right? Through that every day, like something bad is happening.
You should find respite.
You should take a step back and just kind of reorganize things so you're still doing it, right? So you're still aware, but you're not overtaken by your own, like,
you shouldn't detach
anxiety,
yourself from it, but you shouldn't overwhelm
yourself.
And I think that's good. Like, every once in a while, like, I can think of a couple times, like when Trump was elected, or when J.K. Rowling was on her turf shit.
Yeah.
Or like just when people, or even when people are in, like, I remember just a couple weeks ago, for whatever reason, I got a lot of people who were really mean to bi people on the timeline.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, you kind of have to put the phone down and be like, I know, like, just kind of reevaluate.
You can't fight every Twitter account that is probably just a stock puppet with a bad take anyway, and not someone being real. Like, somebody doing, and that doesn't make it any better to be like a quote-unquote troll, right? But that is definitely something to consider, is like, when are we going to stop quote tweeting people who clearly are looking to get dunked on, and then we go and dunk on them for like social points or whatever you want to call it.
Which is why I will never quote tweet or like dunk on someone like Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder or Donald Trump, or dumb right-wing people, or just bigoted people.
But yeah, I think that like everyone should, you know, like fight for equality and stuff like that. And it's not even just like, it should be intersectional too. Like, that's something that I remember in my last philosophy class ever. We were talking about that, like, being like queer issues are black issues because people that are black are also queer, or like black issues are also queer issues because as a black person in the queer community or in the gay community, you need to like basically protect you. It was that sort of thing. Is that the person that wrote it, she was a woman and lesbian, I think, and then she was also black, so she was basically talking about how, like, you know, like, if they're gonna come for me, they're gonna come for you, so we all need to protect each other.
That's why I don't like the kind of pick-me gays. I'm not like those gays, because I feel like at the end of the day, they'll come for them first, but they'll come for all of us in due time.
Exactly. And so it's one of those things where not only should you be like obligated, I guess, to promote, like, you know, LGBT related stuff, but you should also be intersectional with everything else. Like, women's rights is still in that umbrella, like POC rights or indigenous rights, like rights, everything
economic
is in there, like, you know. And so you can't really say, well, I only care about gay issues, because all of like gay issues are inherently impacted, or disability rights as well. I don't think we mentioned that. Like, all of these things are connected. You don't just like leave your, you know, your disabled identity at the door when you like like go into a queer area, or you don't just leave all those other parts of your identity. They're always with you. So you need to make a community and fight, I think, for a world that accepts them. Right?
Yes.
All, like,
the
you
best,
can't just
The
pick.
best person I'd ever heard, I forget, it's killing me. His first name's James. He's a famous writer. He was very popular in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He was like a contemporary of like Martin Luther King Jr. He wrote the book Giovanni's Room. He was a gay man, a gay black man. And he talked about, like, it's curious to me when I meet gay white people, because I don't think that they want gay liberation always to improve the lives of all gay people. I think they want gay liberation so they're given the white privilege they feel like they're owed.
So they can basically, you know, go back, if you want to call it that.
So I don't think it's so when I view it, and I mean, obviously we're white people, and I acknowledge that I won't be perfect on everything, and I just try to have a learning mindset and be flexible with things. But at the end of the day, I think that you shouldn't want it to just be okay. That's why I hate Caitlyn Jenner. It's like, because it's like, she's like, well, it'll be okay for the trans people.
Okay for me, but not for thee.
For the rich white trans people that are passing with money, and are right wing, where it's just like, yeah, you don't want it to be better for trans people. You want the kind of white privilege and white supremacy you feel like you're owed. At the end of the day, I think like a rising tide should carry all ships. Like, it should get better. For all people. It should go better for me, I hope, and for you, but also for black disabled queer people and lesbians and gay and transgender people and people whom I don't share identities with. And who even people whom I may have to lose some of my authority and my privilege to give them space. It might not always be comfortable, but you have to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And it is
with
a
that
learning
too.
experience. But I do think it's inevitably political, and I do think I think all people, but queer people especially, have a kind of a special motive and call to action to be political.
Yeah. Somebody asked us advice for someone who wants to come out, and somebody else asked, do you have any advice for people who are lesbians but struggle with accepting themselves as such due to past experiences? And so I'm not entirely sure what the context of past experiences would be. I kind of had the opposite problem where I had bad experience with guys, and so I was like, I'm a lesbian. And then I was like, no, I'm not, right? And so, you know, I didn't mention that in the bi origin story, but there was a point where I was like, I guess, learned that other identities exist. Some stuff happened, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm a lesbian now. That's definitely how this works, right? No. And so I'm assuming that maybe like it could.
And then you met your fluffy-haired gamer boy Arnold boyfriend.
Exactly.
And
I feel like that coming out and accepting yourself are sometimes tied together, not entirely, but accepting yourself is on the way to coming out, basically. So I feel like that these questions are kind of connected. In terms of accepting yourself, I feel like that being around other gay people that you can trust, kind of like we've talked about, like our friends that are actually supportive. I feel like that's a good way to start. Like I feel like most of my mods in my Discord just came out like you know what I mean? Like they kind of realized us all being together and being kind of gay. That's when it sort of clicked for them, right? So being in that supportive space, you know, that's when I realized that a lot of people were coming out is in the Discord, because I guess that they feel welcomed here, and I think that's great, right? And so I feel like that's kind of like on the road to acceptance, is like when you find other people, you inherently like feel seen, I guess, like feel validated. So I think in accepting yourself, you also kind of have to surround yourself with other people who have been through that journey that you have, and they will kind of help you in a sense, right? I'm not saying that you should be entirely codependent on people for your validation, but like if I was personally struggling with being bi, I think that being around other older bi people that kind of like they've been through it, you know, they've seen it all kind of thing, I think that would be
like
helpful.
Knowing trans people who are further along their transition than I
or
was,
even like YouTube videos, right? Because
like
sometimes you have old people, and I know that sounds silly, but like when you hear about like old, like, you know, bisexual people, I guess in my case,
people,
that were
oh my god, we make it,
they've
we
been
don't die
like around, they've seen some shit, like things suddenly feel a lot better when you know that this is like, you know, people, they're out there and they're telling their stories or doing TED Talks and stuff like that. So I would say accepting yourself, you kind of have to, you'll feel more accepted and supported when you are around like other people. In terms of coming out, I guess
you
I
wouldn't
have
know, would you?
I have a unique I have a unique opinion, I guess. I feel like that it kind of depends on your situation. If you feel that that's like a pressing need inside of you, that's probably going to be different, but I'm always like, if you don't have to, I never saw why, I guess.
Yes.
Right? But that's not me saying that you should or shouldn't. I'm just saying that sometimes when people ask, like, oh, you know, like, what would you tell someone who wants to come out? Well, I would be like, you know, analyze your home situation. It's not that you shouldn't be yourself and everything, but I personally never felt and I guess I never felt the need for another, like, on the other end, is that, like, I knew that my family wouldn't care, so why do I have to come out sort of thing? But sometimes I see people who feel pressured to come out, especially online, just to sort of like fit in with the fandom and like have their identity on their Twitter, but their parents aren't supportive. And I fear for them sometimes because obviously they've made that decision, so I'm sure that they've thought about it. But I feel like that there's sometimes pressure to come out when you're not ready to appease other people. And it should never be about that. And so it's like, if you don't personally feel like you need to for you, you shouldn't do it just because you, you know, think like, oh, well, you know, I need to like post this on Twitter or something. Like I need to like establish myself in my bio, or something like that, right? Like I feel like that it's going to be
medically
case by case,
transitioning
you know?
for like 4 months before I put a little flag on my Twitter bio, and even that's kind of unnecessary. At the end of the day, always do be safe. Like if you know for a fact that your family would be supportive, it sucks. It's not fair.
You should maybe get out of the situation before you tell them.
Until you can get out into the situation and until you are safe, it sucks and it's not fair, but for your own safety, you probably shouldn't come out until you are safe. I also think that, like, I had not come out for a very long time, but even still, and I mean, it's the same thing with just therapy. Like, you have to find little spaces for yourself in a day where, like, gender dysphoria, or you might dislike how you are in your body, or you might dislike having to pretend to be straight.
Yeah.
But if you can do little things, either just like watching people on YouTube or reading books, or just even like fantasize it, like a little healthy bit of fantasy can be nice, or just wearing clothing that makes you feel comfortable, that's slightly more androgynous.
I think it's hard because I don't want people to see this as, oh, they're telling people not to come out, you know, they're telling people to stay in the closet, like it's not even that.
You eventually have to be bold, and you eventually have to say, like, okay, people might not respect me, but at the end of the day, if I know I'm a good person, and I know that being queer is not a bad thing, that at the end of the day, I can only be who I know myself to be, and that if people have issues with that, that's not my problem, that's their problem. Yeah. And if you can accept that, I think that the sooner you can accept that, the healthier your relationship with other people will be if you don't know how they'll react. Yeah. Also, people can sometimes surprise you. Yeah, like, people have surprised me. And I think that, like, that is a kind of joy. And I do hope that people, when they come out, find that acceptance.
I just, like, I feel like that some people are going to be like, oh, well, you're telling them not to come out. You're telling them to hide their identity.
Them to be safe.
And I feel like that criticism mostly comes from straight people. Right? Yeah. I'm sure there's a small minority of people, like, in the LGBT community who do feel like that. But you have to understand is, like, we've been there, sis. Okay, we're not trying to, like, squash anybody. We're trying to, like, help them express themselves as safely as they can.
And also, like, go slowly. Like, at the end of the day, like, the second you actually... A lot of people thought they were bi and then find out that they're gay or straight. A lot of people think that they're non-binary, then find out they're binary.
Some people think they're lesbian and then they realize they're bi.
Right? It's a general process for some people. You don't have to be right the first time. You don't even have to be. You can just question and realize, no, I'm straight, and that's okay.
And I feel like
you don't have to make a big deal.
That's why I've never felt like I've had to come out, because I'm like, why? I don't know. Like, it's just something so personal to me. Like, I understand that there's like, oh, you know, how other people perceive you, and that's important to people, but that's just never been important to me, I guess, for me to be like, sit my mom down and have her acceptance or something. Like, I don't think
your mom's pretty chill
about that. Yeah, she's chill anyway, but I just don't I just don't think about stuff like that. I've always seen it as like, this is my internal thing. This is just how I feel. It's not that it's nobody else's business in the sense that I wouldn't tell anyone, but it's more so like, I don't really care what you think of it, right? I don't need your acceptance. I don't need your validation, right? So it's going to be different for everyone. Some people do want to know if their parents will support them, and I think that's totally fair. I would just like do it when you're moved out.
I just think I think you should do it, but I do think you need to prioritize your safety because bad things do occasionally happen. Not to scare people unduly, but bad things occasionally do happen to people that come out when they're not in a safe situation. That's why queer people have an above average level of like homelessness or suicidal ideation, or so I would just say take it slow. Obviously come out, we're not saying don't come out, but just take it slow, be kind to yourself, understand that it's a learning process and everyone's figuring themselves out. And
I think that's good. All right, so that's basically the end of the Pride podcast.
And I didn't cry once. I got close a couple times. I didn't cry.
Thank you all for watching our Pride podcast. I feel like this is going to be a bit of a questionable edit job, but I hope that you all enjoy it anyway. I keep trying to correct myself.
I'm very proud of myself because I think I was well spoken and I didn't cry.
Aww.
Which is a high bar.
But yeah, we will probably, I feel like that every year we'll make a little Pride podcast. We'll do like gay update.
Sure, gay update.
How's it going? Still gay? All right.
Still gay? All right, bye. It's just like, it's literally a TikTok.
Exactly.
Still gay? Yep. You? Yep. Okay, bye.
And so I hope that you guys enjoy.
Like in a year, I might have like tits. It'll be a great time.
Yeah, we'll have to talk because I feel like there's just so many more things that we didn't talk about.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't talk about like preferences or like butch versus fat. Like we didn't even. You know what I mean?
Go into
we did like the hetero gay pride podcast. You know what I mean? Like for people that are uninitiated, we didn't do like the gay. Like you know what I mean? In a sense, right? Like,
but honestly, a lot of the very niche gay discourses do kind of make me want to eat ground glass.
So it's probably better.
So it's probably best we go surface level and like, ooh, I like cat trap.
Exactly. But anyway, and so
I think the lesbian flag looks nice.
Maybe next week we'll do school just because we'll both be graduated by then. So I feel like we can,
we can
finally start to talk shit. No, it's leave us some questions about our university experience down below if you've gotten this far. Thank you to our patrons again for supporting the channel, and we will see you later. Bye.